The film opens with a woman narrating a local island legend about a fisherman and his pregnant wife. During a violent storm, she falls into the sea and he fails to save her, then spends the rest of his life searching the ocean until another storm kills him too. People say they still see the woman's spirit near the water, as if trying to reclaim the life she dreamed of. The narrator wonders if perhaps the woman didn't drown at all, but found another way out and was one of the lucky ones. Immediately after, we glimpse two women fighting on a boat in the ocean before the scene abruptly cuts. The meaning becomes clear only at the end. The main story begins in the Cayman Islands with Eve Simmons returning from a swim, slightly disoriented, to her loving husband Peter on the beach. They live a comfortable life. Peter and his boss Salvador Ranza have built a successful business. The couple rents a beach house, and Peter dreams aloud of buying a home and taking Eve anywhere in the world next spring. Eve is close with Salvador's wife Chelsea. On a beach walk, Eve quietly tells Chelsea she might be pregnant but hasn't told Peter yet. Chelsea is thrilled. When Chelsea steps away, Eve spots a lone fishing boat offshore and feels a disturbing flash of memory, like something terrible once happened. A local woman calls to ask if she's okay. When Eve looks back, the boat is gone. A pregnancy test confirms Eve is expecting. Peter is delighted, but we soon learn Eve hides the news because she fears losing another baby. She has miscarried before. After a small party at their house with Peter's boss and co-workers, Eve suddenly realizes she has miscarried again and is shattered. She runs outside sobbing and sees a woman standing in the water staring at her. Unnerved, she rushes back in. She keeps glimpsing this mysterious woman and tells Peter, but his flashlight search finds no one. At work, where Eve is receptionist at Peter's company, she confides in Chelsea that she can't face telling Peter. Chelsea comforts her, but Eve continues to see the woman on the beach. One night, while Peter parties at a bar with Salvador and others, he meets the same mysterious woman. Their conversation is not shown. At home, Eve dozes in the bathtub and has a disturbing dream. The next morning, her favorite mug is missing. Later at the office, she sees the woman again, staring at her. Terrified, she tells Peter, who still doesn't believe her. Objects in her life begin subtly shifting. In her Jeep, tiny baby shoes she remembers are inexplicably replaced by a toy turtle she doesn't recall buying. The following morning, she asks Peter why her favorite mug has been swapped. He insists the mug she's holding is the one she loves and says she bought it. When he claims they purchased it at a store near where they were married, she insists they wed in Amsterdam. But Peter says that's wrong and shows wedding photos that don't match her memories. Confused and overwhelmed, she smashes the mug. Peter, concerned, contacts their doctor. We learn Eve has had similar episodes before, memory gaps and denial of events everyone else agrees happened. The doctor explains that losing a baby can trigger emotional confusion and that Eve needs time and care to recover. Peter tries to be supportive, promising to renovate the unused nursery she once chose. But Eve feels something is deeply wrong. The house feels strange, her visions intensify, and her sense of self weakens. The next day at work, she finds another woman calmly sitting at her desk, the same woman she has been seeing. Colleagues greet this woman, Renata, as if she's always worked there. Eve feels as if someone is literally stealing her life. At dinner, Eve asks about the new girl. Peter and Salvador say she needs rest and explain Renata has been with them a long time and will cover for her. Upset, Eve walks out. Later, she spots Renata with Peter and the team and accuses her of having an affair. Peter insists Renata has always been part of the company. On the drive home, they argue. Eve demands to know why she's never met Renata before. Peter reminds her that Renata was on last year's cruise and that he even invited Eve, but she refused. He shows her cruise photos, yet nothing feels real to Eve, like memories of a life she never lived. She begins doubting her own identity. He reassures her she's the woman he loves, but she says the girl he married was once full of life, loved art, adventure, and freedom, someone she no longer recognizes in herself. When he calls her by the pet name Honey Bear, it only fuels her paranoia that he's recycled that nickname for Renata. Furious, Eve follows Renata to a friend's house. Outside, Renata confronts her. Why is she being stalked? Eve snaps that Renata is the intruder. Ranata admits she briefly dated Peter in the past, but says it meant nothing now and that if Eve has doubts, she should talk to her husband. Ranata assumes Eve must have uncovered their old relationship, but Eve knew nothing. Ranata calls her unstable, repeating Peter's words, and walks away. When Eve tells her to stay away, Ranata looks back and says, "This life is mine now," then drives off in Eve's Jeep. Stunned that Ranata has her keys, Eve bikes home, only to find her key no longer opens the front door. Climbing through a window, she discovers Peter in bed with Ranata. Crushed, Eve runs outside crying. Inside, she realizes none of her belongings remain. Drawers are empty. Peter, panicked, threatens to call the police if she won't leave. Eve protests that he's locked her out of her own home and replaced her. Peter replies that the woman inside is his wife. When Eve shows him her bare hand, she sees her wedding ring is gone, now on Renata's finger. Peter says he doesn't recognize Eve at all. To him, it is as if she's a stranger and Renata has always been Eve. Terrified and erased from her own life, Eve goes to Chelsea's house. Chelsea insists Renata is her real friend, Eve, but still lets the distraught woman sleep on the couch, promising things will look better in the morning. Instead, reality itself seems to flip. We see Eve walking along the shore, then suddenly alone, the people vanish. She sits in a fisherman's boat. He tells her she has a long journey ahead, and the boat drifts into the open ocean. Back at Chelsea's house, the family dog barks at the now empty couch where Eve had lain. Chelsea and Salvador come downstairs, and Chelsea has no memory of Eve at all, as if Eve has been erased from existence. The fisherman's wife narration returns. Now Renata and Peter are shown living a happy life. Renata is pregnant and fully occupies Eve's old role. She gives birth and they celebrate. During a later house party, Renata flirts lightly with Salvador. Peter becomes jealous. They argue, and Renata expresses a wish to open a bakery, while Peter insists motherhood will leave her no time. She feels he's already treating their baby like a burden. That night, crying outside, she senses someone near the shore and sees a woman rising from the water. Panicked, she calls Peter, who finds nothing with his flashlight. The audience, however, sees Eve hiding in the bushes. The cycle is restarting just as it did with Eve. Soon Renata begins seeing Eve around her office and home. Strange objects appear that she doesn't remember. She claims they married on the island and never went to Amsterdam, while Peter is certain they did and shows photos she cannot recall. She visits the doctor, but feels no better. When Peter uses an unfamiliar pet name, she's unnerved. At a party, Eve watches Peter from afar. Later, Renata accuses Peter of having an affair. He's bewildered. She mentions their baby, and Peter is shocked. He insists they never had a child. Renata races to the nursery, which is completely empty. Reality fractures again. Peter, shaken, goes to a bar, where he surprisingly sees Eve, who now seems to inhabit Renata's reality. He tries to approach, but she slips away. Outside, Renata is waiting, furious. She chases Eve in her car toward the docks, where a confrontation escalates. Wielding a knife, Renata demands to know where her baby is. Eve insists there was never a baby and that this life doesn't belong to Renata. Renata claims she earned this life and it isn't her fault Eve couldn't be a mother, declaring Eve must be removed. Renata slashes Eve's leg, and shockingly, the same wound appears on Renata's body, as if they share one form. Renata drags Eve into the water. Eve briefly surfaces and sees a fisherman's boat approaching, echoing the opening legend and the earlier vision, before Renata attacks again. They struggle, each drowning the other, and Renata stabs Eve in the stomach. The same fatal wound appears on her own body. Both women sink beneath the waves. By morning, Eve's body washes ashore. A native woman finds her. Over this, a voice speaks of a woman who chose the wrong path and felt hopeless, but whose belief was mistaken. In the final scenes, Eve is alive, now a singer living a new life, suggesting she has found another way out, like the fisherman's wife in the legend.